The massive alien ship hung in space like a dark mountain above the human colony of New Terra. Its black metal hull stretched for miles, covered in weapons that could turn the small planet into dust within minutes. Inside the ship, thousands of alien warriors prepared for another day of conquest. General Zixcar stood 7 feet tall on the main deck, his forearms crossed behind his back as he watched the latest group of human prisoners being brought aboard. His thick, chitinous skin gleamed under the harsh lights, and his yellow eyes showed nothing but cold calculation. He had conquered 43 worlds in his long career, and each one had been easier than the last. These humans were no different from the others. Small, weak, pathetic creatures who barely deserved to breathe the same air as the mighty hegemony forces. They would be catalogued, processed, and sent to work camps on distant moons. Some might be kept for experiments. Most would simply disappear. Into the vast machinery of the Empire, Lisa Martinez stood among the group of 20 human colonists, her hands shaking as alien soldiers prodded them forward with energy weapons. She was 19 years old, an engineering student who had come to New Terra with her family to start a new life. Now she watched in horror as the aliens separated the humans into different groups. The children were being pushed to one side, crying and calling for their parents. The adults were forced to stand in neat rows while alien technicians ran scanning devices over their bodies. The whole process was designed to break their spirit, to show them how powerless they were against the might of the hegemony. Danny Webb, a 10-year-old boy with sandy hair and freckles, stumbled as one of the alien soldiers shoved him toward the children's group. He fell hard on the metal floor, scraping his knee and starting to cry. The soldier raised his energy prod, ready to shock the boy for making noise. Lisa didn't think. She moved without planning, stepping between Danny and the alien soldier. Her heart pounded as she helped the boy to his feet, ignoring the weapon pointed at her chest. "Leave him alone," she said, her voice shaking but determined. "He's just scared." The alien soldier made a harsh clicking sound that might have been laughter. He gestured with his weapon, trying to push Lisa away from the child, but she didn't move. She couldn't move. Every instinct in her body screamed at her to protect Danny, to keep him safe no matter what happened to her. Other humans in the group began to notice what was happening. Some tried to look away, afraid of drawing attention to themselves. Others watched with growing tension as Lisa faced down the armed alien soldier. The air in the processing bay seemed to grow thick with unspoken fear and desperate hope. General Zixcar noticed the disturbance from across the room. He had been reviewing data on human physiology, noting their weak bone structure and limited muscle mass. But now one of these pathetic creatures was actually defying his soldiers. The audacity was almost amusing. He walked over with slow, measured steps, his heavy boots ringing on the metal deck. The other aliens moved aside quickly, knowing better than to get in their general's way. Zixcar had killed subordinates for less than standing in his path. "What is the problem here?" he asked. In perfect English, his voice deep and threatening. The hegemony had learned dozens of languages from conquered worlds, and human speech was particularly simple. The soldier explained the situation in rapid clicks and growls. Zixcar listened with growing irritation. These humans were supposed to be processed efficiently, not waste time with meaningless gestures of defiance. He had a schedule to keep and other worlds to conquer. Lisa felt the general's presence like a shadow falling over her. She had never seen anything so terrifying in her life. This creature was built for war, covered in natural armor that looked like it could stop bullets. His eyes held the cold intelligence of a predator that had never known defeat. But Danny was still pressed against her side, still crying softly. She could feel his small body trembling with fear. Everything else in the universe could go to hell, but she would not let this child be hurt while she could still stand. "Move aside, human," General Zixcar said, his voice like grinding metal. The juvenile will be processed with the others. Your interference is not required." "No," Lisa said, the word coming out stronger than she felt. "You're not going to hurt him." The general's yellow eyes narrowed. In all his years of conquest, he had rarely encountered such direct defiance from a member of a conquered species. Usually, a show of force was enough to break their will completely. But this young human female seemed to have no understanding of her situation. "You dare refuse a direct order?" he asked, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Do you not understand what I am, what I can do to you?" Lisa's mouth was dry with fear, but she didn't move. "I understand you're bigger and stronger than me. I understand you have weapons, and I don't. But I also understand that you'll have to go through me to get to him." The other humans watched in stunned silence. Some of them wanted to tell Lisa to stop, to save herself before it was too late. Others felt a strange pride watching this young woman stand up to the alien general. All of them knew they were witnessing something important, even if they couldn't understand what. General Zixcar had had enough. This human needed to learn her place in the new order. He would make an example of her that the others would remember. His right hand came up in a casual backhand slap, the kind of blow he might use to discipline a misbehaving pet. The impact caught Lisa across the left side of her face, snapping her head to the side and splitting her lip. The force of the blow sent her stumbling backward, but she managed to keep her feet. Blood ran down her chin as she straightened up, still standing between Danny and the general. For a moment, everything was quiet. Then General Zixcar blinked, his yellow eyes showing the first hint of confusion. He took a step backward, his hand moving to his head as if something was wrong. "What ... double he began, but the words died in his throat. His eyes rolled back, showing only white. His massive body swayed like a tree in a strong wind. 3 seconds after his hand had struck Lisa's face, General Zixcar collapsed. 7 feet of alien muscle and bone crashed to the deck with a sound like thunder, unconscious before he hit the ground. The silence that followed was absolute. Every alien and human in the processing bay stared at the fallen general in complete shock. The most feared warrior in the hegemony fleet lay motionless on the cold metal floor, brought down by a human girl who weighed half what he did. Lisa wiped blood from her lip with the back of her hand, as confused as everyone else. She had no idea what had just happened. All she knew was that Danny was safe behind her, and that somehow, impossibly, the monster who had threatened him was no longer a threat. But as she looked around at the stunned faces of aliens and humans alike, Lisa began to understand that whatever had just occurred, it was going to change everything. The silence stretched for 10 long seconds before chaos erupted on the alien ship. Officers shouted orders in their harsh language while medical teams rushed toward the fallen general. Red warning lights began flashing as emergency alerts echoed. Through the corridors, Dr. Kethron arrived within minutes, his 3-legged gait carrying him swiftly across the deck. He was the ship's chief scientist, responsible for studying new species before they were enslaved or destroyed. His pale green skin and large black eyes made him look less threatening than the warriors, but his mind was just as sharp and twice as curious. "Get these humans secured," barked Captain Vorthek as he took command. He was shorter than the general, but no less dangerous, with scars covering his arms from dozens of battles. "No one touches them until we understand what happened here." The alien soldiers formed a wide circle around the humans, their weapons drawn but not aimed directly at the prisoners. Nobody wanted to risk whatever had brought down their general. Lisa noticed the fear in their movements, the way they kept glancing at her as if she might explode at any moment. Dr. Kethran knelt beside General Zixcar, running portable scanners over his motionless body. The readings made no sense. The general's vital signs were stable, but his brain pattern showed massive disruption across multiple neural pathways. It was like someone had scrambled his thoughts with an electric mixer. "Is he alive?" Captain Vorthik demanded. Yes, but barely responsive, Dr. Kethran replied, his voice filled with scientific confusion. His mind appears to be in some kind of protective shutdown. I have never seen anything like this before. Lisa stood perfectly still, Danny pressed against her side. Her lip had stopped bleeding, but she could taste copper in her mouth. The other humans clustered around her, as if being near her might protect them from whatever came next. She had no idea why they thought that would help. Run. Full scans on the human female, Captain Vorthik ordered. I want to know everything about her biology, her brain chemistry, everything. 2 medical technicians approached Lisa with handheld scanners, but they moved slowly and kept their distance. When the devices activated, the readings they got were completely normal. Human female, approximately 19 years old, slightly elevated stress hormones, but nothing dangerous. Nothing that could explain what had happened to the general. Dr. Kethran stood up, his large eyes fixed on Lisa. You, he said in careful English, what did you do to him? Nothing, Lisa replied honestly. He hit me, then he fell down. I don't understand any of this. You must have done something. Beings do not simply collapse after striking other beings. There must be a weapon, a device, some form of technology. Lisa spread her hands wide. Look at me. Do I look like I have any weapons? I'm wearing a t-shirt and jeans. Where would I hide anything that could hurt someone like him? The doctor studied her carefully. She was telling the truth. He could see that. But the truth made no sense. In all his years of studying conquered species, he had never encountered anything like this. Species were either strong enough to fight back with weapons and technology, or they were weak and got enslaved. There was no middle ground. Captain Vorthik began pacing, his heavy footsteps echoing in the processing bay. Show me the security recordings, he demanded. The ship's computer projected a holographic display showing the last few minutes in perfect detail. Everyone watched as the scene played out again. General Zixkar approached Lisa. She refused to move away from the child. The general struck her across the face. 3 seconds later, he collapsed. Run it again, the captain ordered. Slower this time. The hologram replayed the moment of contact frame by frame. Just as the general's hand connected with Lisa's face, there was something. A tiny flicker of energy, so brief and faint that it was almost invisible. But the ship's sensors had caught it. There, Dr. Kethran pointed at the display. Do you see that energy discharge? Captain Vorthik leaned closer. What kind of energy? Unknown. The wavelength does not match any known technology. It appears to originate from the human female herself. The implications of this discovery sent a chill through the alien officers. If humans could generate some kind of defensive energy field, it changed everything about their conquest plans. But the energy reading was so small, so brief, that it should not have been able to affect anything larger than an insect. Lisa watched the hologram replay with growing confusion. I don't see anything special. He hit me. I got hurt. He fell down. I don't know what you're talking about with energy fields. Dr. Kethran ran his scanners over her again, this time looking for any trace of unusual energy patterns. The readings showed nothing abnormal, but he had learned not to trust normal readings when dealing with impossible situations. Separate the humans into individual holding cells, Captain Vorthik decided. If one of them has some kind of ability, I want them isolated until we understand what we're dealing with. No, Lisa said firmly. We stay together. The captain turned to stare at her. You are in no position to make demands, human. Maybe not, Lisa replied. But I'm not letting you separate us. These people are scared and confused. They need to stay together. As she spoke, something interesting happened. The other humans moved closer to her, forming a tight group with Lisa at the center. It was not a planned movement, more like an instinct. They all shared without thinking about it. Dr. Kethran noticed the behavior immediately. Fascinating. They are exhibiting protective clustering behavior. This suggests the defensive response may not be limited to the female. 2 alien soldiers stepped forward to grab Lisa and force her away from the group. The moment they got within arm's reach of her, both aliens stumbled and grabbed their heads as if sudden pain had struck them. They backed away quickly there, faces showing confusion and fear. What just happened? Captain Vorthek demanded. I don't know, one of the soldiers replied. When I got close to her, my head started pounding. It felt like someone was drilling into my skull. Dr. Kethran's eyes widened with understanding. The defensive field is still active. It appears to trigger when the humans perceive a threat, to themselves or others in their group. Captain Vorthek processed this information with growing alarm. If the humans could disable his soldiers just by being approached, it made them incredibly dangerous prisoners. But they showed no signs of being able to control the ability. It seemed to activate automatically when they felt threatened. Sir, a communications officer called from across the room. We're receiving reports from other ships in the fleet. Similar incidents are being reported involving human prisoners. The captain's blood ran cold. What kind of incidents? Commander Rixville. On the destroyer Kethmo struck a human male who refused to work. The commander collapsed and has not regained consciousness. Dr. Welthar on the Science vessel attempted to separate a human female from her infant. He is now in the medical bay with severe neural trauma. Dr. Kethran began connecting the pieces. It is not just this human female. The entire species may possess this defensive capability. Every ship in the fleet that has taken human prisoners may be experiencing the same phenomenon. Captain Vorthek realized they were facing something unprecedented. The hegemony had built its empire on the principle that superior technology and ruthless violence could overcome any resistance. But what happened when violence itself became impossible to use? Lisa could see the fear growing in the alien officers' faces. She didn't understand what was happening to her or the other humans, but she could tell it was something the aliens had never encountered before. That gave her a small measure of hope in an otherwise hopeless situation. We're not your enemies, she said quietly. We just want to go home to our families. We don't want to fight anyone. Dr. Kethran looked at her with something that might have been respect. I believe you speak the truth, human. But I fear the truth may be more dangerous than any weapon you could carry. Around them, the great alien ship continued its patrol above New Terra, but everything had changed. The hunters had become the hunted, and none of them understood the rules of this new game. The reports kept coming in from across the hegemony fleet. Each message brought news of another incident, another alien officer brought down by contact with human prisoners. Captain Vorthek stood in the command center watching the tactical display as red warning indicators appeared on ship after ship. On the heavy cruiser Threnkor, Lieutenant Kexmore had tried to force human colonist Jake Murphy to repair a damaged power coupling. When Jake refused, saying the work was too dangerous without proper safety equipment, the lieutenant struck him with an energy baton. The alien officer collapsed immediately and remained unconscious for 6 hours. Aboard the science vessel Morthek, Dr. Welthar had attempted to separate human mother Kelly Adams from her crying baby daughter. The moment he touched the infant, the doctor experienced what he described as feeling every emotion the mother was experiencing, magnified 100 times. The overwhelming flood of protective love and desperate fear had sent him into shock, but the most disturbing report came from the patrol ship Vexlin. Commander Thaxall had grown frustrated with a group of human teenagers who kept trying to comfort each other despite orders to remain silent. When he moved to separate them by force, all 6 teens had stepped between him and his target. The psychic backlash from their combined protective instinct had knocked the commander unconscious and affected every alien within 50 feet. Doctor Kethron compiled the data in his laboratory, while General Zixkar remained motionless in the medical bay. The pattern was becoming clear, and it terrified him more than any weapon he had ever studied. The defensive response activates most strongly when humans are protecting others, he reported to Captain Vorthak. Single humans show limited effects, but when they act together to defend their group, the power increases dramatically. How is this possible? The captain demanded. We have conquered hundreds of species. Many were physically stronger than humans. Some had advanced technology. None of them could do anything like this. Dr. Keth Rand pulled up his research files on the command center's main screen. I have been reviewing our historical archives. There are mentions of similar phenomena in very old records, but the species that develop these abilities are all extinct. Extinct how? Unknown. The records are incomplete, but they refer to something called the Guardian Curse. Species that developed powerful protective instincts, sometimes evolved defensive mechanisms that became too strong to control. The theory suggests they eventually turned these abilities inward and destroyed themselves. Captain Vorthak studied the data with growing unease. Are you saying the humans might eliminate themselves? Or they might eliminate us? Dr. Kethron replied quietly. I am beginning to think their abilities are still developing. Each incident shows slightly stronger effects than the last. Meanwhile, in the processing bay, Lisa and the other 19 human prisoners were experiencing changes they didn't understand. The fear and confusion that had gripped them when they were first captured was being replaced by something else. They could sense each other's emotions more clearly now, feel when someone in their group was afraid or hurt. Danny Webb, the 10-year-old boy Lisa had protected, stayed close to her side. But now he seemed to be watching over the other children just like she was. When one of the teenage girls started crying from homesickness, Danny took her hand and somehow made her feel better without saying a word. Jake Murphy, a construction worker in his 30s, found himself naturally taking charge of the group's practical needs. He organized sleeping arrangements, made sure everyone got their share of the alien food rations, and kept track of who might be getting sick. But more than that, he could sense when someone was thinking about doing something dangerous or stupid, and he was always there to talk them out of it. Kelly Adams held her baby daughter close, but she noticed that other people's children were starting to feel almost as important to her as her own. When the alien guards moved too close to any of the young ones, she felt the same fierce protective anger she would feel if they threatened her own child. Lisa realized she was at the center of these changes. The other humans looked to her for guidance without anyone deciding she should be their leader. It just happened naturally, like water flowing downhill. But the responsibility felt heavier than anything she had ever carried. Something is happening to us, she said quietly to Jake during one of their rest periods. I can feel all of you in my head now, not your thoughts, but your feelings, your fears and hopes. Jake nodded. I feel it too. It's like we're becoming connected somehow. When they tried to separate us earlier, it felt like they were trying to cut off one of my arms. The alien guards maintained their distance, but Lisa could see them watching nervously. Word had spread through the ship about what happened to anyone who got too aggressive with the human prisoners. Even the regular soldiers were treating them with cautious respect. Dr. Kethron visited them several times, always keeping his distance, but asking questions through the ship's communication system. He wanted to understand how their abilities worked, whether they could control them, what triggered the strongest responses. We don't control anything, Lisa told him honestly. It just happens when someone tries to hurt us or the people we care about. We don't even know it's happening until whoever attacked us falls down. Can you make it stop? The doctor asked. Lisa thought about it carefully. I don't think so. It's like asking me to stop breathing or stop my heart from beating. It's just part of us now. The truth was more complicated than that. Lisa was beginning to understand that their abilities weren't just random evolution. They seemed designed for a specific purpose, triggered by specific situations. Violence against humans resulted in immediate consequences for the aggressor. Threats to human children or families produced the strongest effects. Attempts to separate human groups caused psychological distress in anyone involved. It was as if someone had programmed them to be the perfect counter to exactly the kind of empire the hegemony had built. 3 days after the first incident, General Zick's car finally began to stir in the medical bay. Dr. Kethran was monitoring his vital signs when the general's eyes fluttered open. "What happened?" Zick's car asked weakly. "You struck the human female. Then you collapsed. Do you remember anything else?" The general tried to sit up, but a wave of dizziness forced him back down. "I remember touching her face. Then I felt something. Like a flood of emotions that weren't mine. Fear, anger, but also something else. Something protective and fierce." "Describe it more specifically." Zick's car struggled to find words for what he had experienced. It was like being forced to feel. What she felt, but also what the child felt, and all the other humans. Their terror at being captured, their love for each other, their willingness to die to protect the weak ones. It was overwhelming. Dr. Kethran made notes rapidly. "And how do you feel now?" The general considered the question. "Different." "When I think about ordering violence against the humans, I feel sick. Not afraid, but actually physically ill. Like my body is rejecting the idea." This was the confirmation Dr. Kethran had feared. The human defensive ability didn't just disable attackers temporarily. It appeared to create permanent changes in the neural pathways of anyone who experienced it. The hegemony's most experienced general was no longer capable of harming the very prisoners he was supposed to control. Captain Vorthek received the medical report with growing alarm. If exposure to human psychic fields could permanently alter hegemony personnel, then every ship carrying human prisoners was at risk of losing its command structure. But the situation was about to get much worse. Long-range sensors detected a massive fleet approaching from the core worlds. Admiral Krexter was coming with 50 of the Fez of the Feo, hegemony's most powerful warships, and orders to solve the human problem once and for all. The Admiral's solution would be simple and final. If the humans couldn't be controlled through normal means, then they would be eliminated entirely. Every human colony, every human ship, every human life would be extinguished before their defensive abilities could spread further. Lisa felt the approaching threat like a cold wind. She didn't know how she knew, but she was certain that something terrible was coming for her people. The gentle connection she shared with the other prisoners began to pulse with urgency and fear. "They're coming," she whispered to Jake. "Whoever they are, they're coming to kill us all." Admiral Krexter's fleet arrived like a storm of metal and fire. 50 massive warships dropped out of hyperspace around New Terra, their weapons already charging for orbital bombardment. The Admiral himself was a legend among the hegemony forces, known for solving problems with overwhelming violence and asking questions later. Captain Vorthek received the Admiral's transmission with barely concealed dread. Krexter's face filled the command screen, his scarred features twisted with anger and disgust. "Captain, your reports about these humans are either lies or evidence of complete incompetence." The Admiral's voice boomed through the ship. "No. Primitive species possesses abilities that can threaten hegemony forces. I am here to demonstrate proper military procedure." "Admiral, with respect, the situation is more complex than our initial report suggested," Vorthek replied carefully. "The humans appear to have evolved a defensive mechanism that specifically counters aggressive behavior. Every attempt to use force against them has resulted in casualties among our personnel." Krexter's laugh was harsh and mocking. "Defensive mechanism? They are barely evolved primates with primitive technology. I will show you how real warriors deal with defiant slaves." The Admiral's flagship, a massive dreadnought called the Iron Fist, moved into position above the human processing facility on New Terra's surface. Its main guns were powerful enough to level entire cities. Krexter planned to make an example that would be remembered across the galaxy. Meanwhile, aboard Vorthe ship, Lisa felt the new threat like ice in her veins. The connection she shared with the other human prisoners had grown stronger over the past few days, and now she could sense something that terrified her. Down on the planet below, hundreds of thousands of human colonists were going about their daily lives, unaware that death was approaching from the sky. They're going to kill everyone, she whispered to Jake Murphy. All the people on the planet, all the families and children. Jake felt it too, a terrible certainty that filled him with desperate rage. We have to do something. What can we do? Kelly Adams asked, holding her baby daughter tighter. We're prisoners on an alien ship. We don't have weapons or ships or anything. But Lisa was beginning to understand that they did have something. The protective instinct that had brought down General Zix's car was still growing, still changing. She could feel it connecting not just the prisoners around her, but reaching out toward the humans on the planet below. Dr. Kethron monitored the humans from his laboratory, watching their brain activity spike to unprecedented levels. The neural patterns he was seeing defied everything he thought he knew about biology and physics. The 20 prisoners were somehow synchronizing their thoughts and emotions, creating a collective consciousness focused entirely on protecting their species. Captain, he called urgently to the command center. You need to see this. The human brain activity is off all known scales. They are generating energy patterns that should be impossible for organic beings. Captain Vorthik studied the readings. With growing alarm, what does it mean? I believe they are preparing for some kind of coordinated defensive response. But the scale of energy they are producing suggests it will not be limited to this ship. General Zixkar appeared on the command deck, still weak from his encounter with Lisa, but determined to understand what was happening. The changes in his neural patterns had left him unable to think about harming humans, but they had also given him insights into their emotional states that no other hegemony officer possessed. They know about the Admiral's plan, he told Captain Vorthik. They can sense the threat to their people on the planet. Their protective instincts are expanding beyond just defending themselves. Expanding how? I can feel echoes of what they feel, the general explained. Their connection is not limited by distance or physical barriers. They are linked to every human in this system, maybe beyond. When Admiral Krexter attacks the planet, he will not just be threatening 20 prisoners. He will be threatening their entire species. The implications hit Captain Vorthak like a physical blow. If the human defensive abilities could reach across space to protect their homeworld, then Krexter's fleet might be walking into a trap beyond anything the hegemony had ever encountered. Admiral, Krexter's voice crackled over the communication system again. All ships, prepare for planetary bombardment. We will demonstrate what happens to species that resist the hegemony. Target the largest population centers first. Down on New Terra, human families went about their evening routines. Parents tucked children into bed. Couples shared quiet dinners. Friends gathered to talk about their hopes for the future. None of them knew that weapons capable of cracking the planet's crust were aimed at their heads, but something strange began happening in the human communities. People started feeling restless, anxious, like something important was about to happen. Children woke from their sleep and ran to their parents. Adults found themselves checking on their neighbors for no reason they could explain. Lisa felt every single one of them. Hundreds of thousands of human minds touching hers through a connection she barely understood. Their fear, their love, their determination to protect each other flowed through her like a river of pure emotion. I can feel them. All, she said to the other prisoners. Every person down there. They're scared, but they don't know why. Jake placed his hand on her shoulder, and suddenly he could feel them too. The sensation was overwhelming, like trying to hold an ocean in a teacup. But underneath the chaos of so many minds was something else, something that gave him hope. They're not just scared, he realized. They're angry. They know someone is threatening their families, and they're ready to fight back. Admiral Krexter gave the final order. All ships, fire at will. Cleanse this world of the human infection. 50. Massive warships opened fire simultaneously. Energy beams that could melt mountains lanced down toward the planet's surface. Missile salvos that could flatten continents streaked through the atmosphere. It was enough firepower to kill every living thing on New Terra 10 times over. But something impossible happened. Every single weapon simply stopped working. Energy beams flickered and died halfway to their targets. Missiles lost power and drifted harmlessly into space. Plasma cannons overloaded and shut down. Across the entire fleet, every system designed to cause harm to humans simply ceased to function. Admiral Krexter stared at his tactical display in disbelief. What is happening? Why are our weapons not firing? His bridge crew frantically checked their systems, but everything appeared normal except for one crucial detail. Every weapon that targeted human populations had somehow been disabled by an energy field that their sensors couldn't even detect. Lisa felt the moment when the weapons failed. It was like a great weight lifting from her chest. The protective field that had started with her defending Danny had grown beyond anything she could have imagined. It now encompassed her entire species, making them essentially immune to the kind of violence that the hegemony represented. Dr. Kethran watched his instruments in awe. The energy readings from the human prisoners had spiked at the exact moment. The fleet's weapons failed. Somehow, their collective will to protect their people had reached across space and rendered an entire battle fleet helpless. Admiral, Captain Vorthak called to the flagship. Our weapons are not malfunctioning. They are being actively prevented from harming humans by some kind of psychic field. The same phenomenon that has been affecting our personnel is now affecting our technology. Admiral Krexter's face twisted with rage and frustration. Impossible. No species can project defensive fields across interstellar distances. Prepare boarding parties. We will take their cities by hand if necessary. But General Zixkar already knew what would happen. Any hegemony forces that attacked humans directly would experience the same neural disruption that had brought him down. The more violent their intentions, the stronger the defensive response would be. Admiral, he transmitted to the flagship, I respectfully suggest we reconsider our approach. The humans have evolved beyond our ability to conquer them through traditional means. Are you suggesting we retreat from a species of primitives? Krexter snarled. I am suggesting that continuing this attack will result in the loss of the entire fleet, Zixkar replied calmly. We are facing something that our military doctrine has no answer for. Lisa could sense the confusion and fear spreading through the alien fleet. Their commanders were trained to solve problems with violence, but violence was no longer an option. For them, every aggressive action they considered was met with automatic defensive responses that left them weaker and more vulnerable. The great hegemony war machine had encountered something it couldn't break, couldn't conquer, and couldn't destroy. For the first time in their history, they were completely powerless against an enemy that refused to fight back but would not be defeated. The humans had become something new, something unprecedented in galactic history. They were a species that made war itself impossible. 6 months later, the galaxy looked nothing like it had before Admiral Krexter's failed attack on New Terra. The massive hegemony fleet still hung in space around the human colony, but everything about the situation had changed completely. Admiral Krexter himself sat in what used to be called an interrogation chamber, though now it served more as a counseling room. Dr. Kethran worked with him daily, helping him understand the emotional changes that had swept through his mind after weeks of exposure to human psychic fields. I remember commanding the destruction of entire worlds, Krexter said quietly, his voice lacking the harsh authority it once carried. I remember feeling satisfaction when populations surrendered in terror. But now when I think about those memories, all I can feel is the fear and pain of the people I killed. Dr. Kethron nodded, making notes on his tablet. The transformation had affected every member of the fleet differently, but the pattern was always the same. Prolonged exposure to humans had awakened empathy in beings who had never experienced it before. Warriors who had built their careers on violence now found themselves unable to harm even insects. The humans call it emotional evolution, the doctor explained. Their defensive field does not just protect them from violence. It rewrites the neural pathways of any being that spends time near them, making cruelty and aggression literally impossible. The former admiral looked out the window at New Terra below. Human and alien children played together in the colony's parks, their laughter drifting up through the ship's communication systems. Are we still prisoners here? That depends on how you define prisoner, Dr. Kethron replied. You are free to leave at any time. But most of our people have chosen to stay and learn from the humans. General Zixkar walked through the ship's corridors, his duties now completely different from what they had been. Instead of planning battles and conquests, he spent his days coordinating relief efforts and cultural exchange programs. The changes in his brain had made him naturally protective of all sentient life, not just his own species. He found Lisa Martinez in the ship's observation lounge, watching the sunset paint New Terra's sky in brilliant colors. She had become something, like an ambassador, helping newly transformed aliens understand their emotional changes while learning to control her own growing abilities. How are the new arrivals adjusting? Zixkar asked, settling into a chair beside her. Better than expected, Lisa replied. The Korthak delegation from the Outer Rim territories arrived yesterday. Their commander tried to intimidate Jake during the welcoming ceremony, and now he spends most of his time crying happy tears whenever he sees human children playing. The general nodded. Word of what had happened to the hegemony fleet had spread across the galaxy faster than their fastest ships. Species that had been conquered decades ago were sending representatives to learn about the humans and their transformative abilities. Former enemies were becoming allies simply by spending time in human communities. Jake Murphy had returned to his engineering work, but now he led integrated teams of humans and aliens working together on projects that benefited everyone. The alien technology combined with human creativity was producing innovations that neither species could have achieved alone. The interesting thing, Lisa continued, is that our abilities keep evolving too. We're not just defending ourselves anymore. We're actively helping other species become better versions of themselves. Dr. Kethron had documented the changes carefully. Human children born after the awakening showed even stronger psychic abilities than their parents. They could sense emotional distress across vast distances and project feelings of comfort and safety to anyone who needed them. More remarkably, they seemed to be teaching these abilities to alien children who played with them. Kelly Adams watched her baby daughter crawling around the ship's nursery, which now housed children from a dozen different species. The little girl showed no fear of beings that would have terrified adults just months ago. Instead, she seemed to naturally calm upset alien children and encourage shy ones to join in games. She's going to grow up in a completely different universe than we did, Kelly said to Lisa during one of their daily talks. A universe where war is literally impossible because anyone who tries to start one gets overwhelmed with empathy for their enemies. The transformation wasn't limited to individual changes. Entire governments were restructuring themselves as their military leaders found themselves unable to order attacks on other species. The hegemony's client states were declaring independence, but instead of fighting to keep them, the alien leadership was helping them establish peaceful, cooperative societies. Admiral Krexter had become one of the strongest advocates for this new approach. His former victims were shocked to receive personal apologies and offers of assistance in rebuilding what his forces had destroyed. The same mind that had once planned genocide now worked tirelessly to heal the wounds he had inflicted. "The humans have given us a gift," he said during the galaxy-wide broadcast that reached billions of beings. "They have shown us that strength does not come from the ability to hurt others. True strength comes from the ability to protect others, to help them grow and flourish." Lisa found herself thinking about that first day when she had stepped between Danny Webb and the alien soldier. Such a small moment, protecting one frightened child from harm. She had no idea that single act of courage would change the course of galactic history. The boy himself had grown into a natural leader among the human children. At 11 years old, he already showed signs of the same protective instincts that had awakened humanity's gift. But his abilities were stronger and more focused than the first generation. He could project feelings of safety and belonging to entire groups of beings at once. "Do you think we were always meant to be like this?" Danny asked Lisa one evening as they watched the stars together. "Like maybe the universe needed someone to help all the angry species learn how to be nice to each other." Lisa considered the question seriously. "I don't know if we were meant for it, but we're certainly good at it. Maybe that's what matters." The changes continued to spread as human communities were established on worlds throughout the galaxy. Each new colony became a center of transformation, teaching other species that cooperation was more powerful than conquest, that protecting others was more satisfying than dominating them. Dr. Kethran's research suggested that the transformation was irreversible and self-sustaining. Any species that spent significant time around humans would develop similar empathic abilities and pass them on to their children. Within a few generations, the entire galaxy would be populated by beings incapable of cruelty or violence. "We are witnessing the birth of a new type of civilization," he wrote in his final report. "One based not on the rule of the strong over the weak, but on the natural desire of all sentient beings to protect and nurture each other." Lisa stood on New Terra's surface, watching ships from hundreds of worlds arrive and depart in peaceful trade and cultural exchange. Former enemies worked side by side in the fields and factories. Children of a dozen species played together in schools that taught cooperation and understanding above all else. She touched her lip where General Zixcar had struck her so many months ago. The small scar had healed, but the memory remained clear. One moment of violence had triggered a transformation that changed everything. The universe was vast and full of wonders, but perhaps the greatest wonder was the simplest one. When people chose to protect each other instead of hurting each other, everything became possible. The humans had learned that lesson first, but they would not be the last. As night fell over New Terra, Lisa could feel the gentle presence of millions of minds across the galaxy, all connected by the same basic desire to keep each other safe. The age of conquest was over. The age of protection had begun. And in the growing network of empathic connections that linked species across countless worlds, she sensed something that filled her with quiet joy. The universe itself seemed to be smiling.